and has several hundred employees to help execute that vision and the goals for the city. All right, moving on. The city and the council and a creating policy adopted some years ago, Vision 2030, which is in some ways the highest statement or aspirational goals or policies of the city. One is to create and maintain balanced and sustainable financial plans, government budgets that keep tax and utility fair, utility rates fair, broadly and competitive, while still maintaining quality services and cost-effective management of our community's infrastructure. So that is one of the goals of the council. Moving on, the council also passed an intent statement in the year 2012. It is legislative intent, policy, and priority of the municipal council to work with the mayor to consider appropriations regularly for funding priorities as city revenues exceed estimated budget projections. So what does that phrase mean? As revenues exceed estimated budget projections. So 3 or 4 years ago, actually probably 5 years ago now, the city was facing $1 million shortfall, and projecting out that shortfall for another 10 years, it just, let's move on to the next slide. That balance of revenues and expenditures seemed to grow more and more. Move on. The goal of the budget, though, and the goal of the council is to bring those two into alignment. And that has to be done through various mechanisms and means. There's a lot of work behind that. The council has been making steady progress over the last 4 or 5 years in achieving this vision and policy. For several years ago, this is what it looked like. Revenues were projected to drastically not keep up with inflation over 10 years, looking at about a $12 to $14 million difference in revenues versus expenditures, anticipated expenditures. However, that gap and the council's goal, it was to close it. That progress has changed. Now, the scale of this chart is a little bit different. I apologize for that. We're still looking at a gap. I'm going to zoom in on that to make that a little more accurate. But that the council's work has been to, and actually this is based off some of the proposals by the executive branch on how to best do that. And that's some of the things that the council is weighing and considering right now. Not all of these policies that will close that gap are adopted yet, and we'll cover a little bit about that tonight. So there are 3 main topics that the council is currently considering in regards to the budget. One is a property tax increase. 2, a RAP tax, which is a recreation, arts, and parks tax, and utility rates. And we'll just briefly cover some of the main points behind each of those funding revenue mechanisms to help maintain some of our goals as a city. Looking at the RAP tax, and by the way, all these are flyers in the back. Provo City has increased its property tax since 1991. Roughly half of the property in Provo is tax exempt. We have some large institutions, BYU, the Regional Medical Center, Country Club, other nonprofit government entities which are tax exempt, and so we are a little bit in a different situation in some other cities where they rely more heavily on property tax, but they also have more property that is taxable in their cities. Yearly inflation costs is a continually tick upward. We see inflation, and it's one thing that's almost sure to always move forward. We very rarely see it move backwards, although we have recently. But that inflationary cost is a struggle because it decreases our purchasing power. So if the candy bar is $1 this year, and now it's $1.03 next year, and you still only have $1 in your budget, you can't buy the candy bar. And these are really, when we look at big ticket items, several years ago we did an analysis about police vehicles. What we could buy for a police car for $20,000, that's on the low end. Just over several years, that purchasing powers may go down to $16,000, and you can still have that revenue to buy them. It's still a $20,000 equivalent in today's dollars police car. So the mayor, actually referring back to a council policy to annually consider the property tax and where it should be, proposed in his budget a 2.28% increase in the Provo City's portion of the property tax. Now, a lot of you will see bigger increases on your property tax bill. Many of you probably got them in the mail in the last couple of weeks. Some of that has to do with other taxing entities that also receive revenue for property tax. Lion's share of that is through the school district, and we have some other entities, Central Utah Water Conservancy and Utah County, which also collect property tax. About 25% of your property tax dollar does go to Provo City, but even then, that's further sliced into paying for some facilities like the rec center, and then having the rest of it go to general operations, funding parks and rec, police, and also one big sliver is the library, funding this facility. They have their own dedicated slice of that 25% of your property tax dollar. We're missing part of that graphic. Just zoom into it. There we go. Now, the council's intent statement says years ago, consider raising the property to keep this year. Again, it was a 2.28%, which is legislation. However, in that additional revenue on increased needs in the police department by funding additional offices. And rear vehicles and salary, that comes out to about $92,000, which they base the rate, the increased rate on.
Is the salary increase benefits?
Yes. Yeah, $75,000 would be his base salary and benefits. So health, medical, well, it's the same, medical, retirement, other benefits. Okay. Before we move on to wrap tax, really I would like you to engage with the council members on me. If there's some technical questions that you don't want to lose, I'd be happy to answer those about property tax. Right?
Why would we not just tax like the country club?
Okay, the country club is a nonprofit entity, and nonprofit entities are tax exempt under federal law. So,
Country club is
until recently, the NFL was a nonprofit too. So there's all sorts of interesting things about nonprofits. Usually nonprofits are more along the lines of charitable organizations, but there are some interesting classifications in the tax law that does allow the country club to be taxed. Okay. Okay.
When you talk about how inflation eats at
City's purchasing power.
yeah, purchasing power, the amount of money you have to use, do you not consider the fact that the residents have to deal with inflation too?
It's a very real
Now,
issue.
the government can say, oh, we need more money, raise the fees or the taxes or float a bond or whatever, and then we'll have all this money to spend. Where do the residents go?
And I think that's where the policy consideration and the varying trade-offs. Okay, the question is, the government has inflationary costs, so do citizens. And how do we account for increasing, I don't want to say this accurately, increasing our budget when maybe some citizens' budgets do not increase. Is that fair? Recapture. Okay, and that's certainly a consideration, and I think that's one of the type of questions. It's not a technical question, that's more on the policy side. So I'm going to defer the answer to the council, and they can actually choose if they want to answer that now or hold off on that and answer that at the end. Mr. Garrett.
Here, I was glad you were getting that question. We'll wait.
Okay, thank you.
We'll come back.
So let's just make sure somebody captures us so we don't forget. Okay. Let's move on to the next topic. The next topic is wrap tax. Now, I said that's recreation, arts, and parks. We, again, as far as the council establishing policy and vision, city council has adopted policies regarding parks and recreation. Some of the highest level policies are again contained in a document called Vision 2030, but they have further refined that policy through the funding of a Parks and Rec master plan, which was completed a couple years ago, and its subsequent adoption by the council. And that master plan really outlines sort of several components. One is current needs in the form of upgrades, replacements, and also needs in the forms of maybe additional growth to our city, maintaining a certain service level for parks per number of residents in the city. And of course that manifests in different types of facilities. And so this plan was prepared and how to best address those needs, and again subsequently adopted by the council. Having adopted that, there is a clear plan on what may be needed or has been is put on the list for consideration, but not a dedicated funding source to ensure those things are taken care of. And so one of the ways that has been proposed, and again this has been under the council's intent statements for several years, to study this issue and to consider placing it before the voters, is this RAP tax. And how this works is, one, this is actually not a decision the council ultimately can decide on their own. This is a 1.1% sales tax levy. We go on your sales tax, we go to the grocery store, not the grocery store. Grocery store is kind of right, right?
Grocery stores in Provo.
But no, when you go to Costco or you go to Sam's Club. Okay, so your sales tax bill, you get that receipt, it's an additional 0.1%. That's 1 cent for every $10 you spend in sales tax or in taxable goods.
Staying with Costco.
Yeah. Well, and I think actually, yeah, I think I understand what Mr. Miller is saying. When you go to Costco, because several of you do, not me, because I'm Provo Oil. But when you do go to Costco, you actually are paying this levy already. This is a levy that Orem collects for their city to fund their parks and arts programs. Provo does not currently collect this levy. And so many of you are paying this already through other shopping opportunities outside the community. It's proposed that this be put before the voters to consider. This would actually have to be initially voter approved, so the majority of voters have to vote for this, and then subsequently finally approved by the council. So now how are the funds used? Again, we've talked about the master plan, and there's still some consideration about exactly the distribution ratio. The council is still considering throughout the next coming weeks a final proposal that they'll present to the voters on the distribution between parks, recreation, and arts programs. And I think that's one thing I would think that the council is interested in hearing feedback on in the coming weeks. We anticipate that if this was to pass, it would generate about $1.2 million per year for these activities, and they again would be used to implement various parts of the Parks and Rec master plan as well, so possibly some additional arts fund. Let's move on. We already pretty much covered this, but I think there is a huge emphasis though on, we do have some aging facilities. We have, and those might need, that might be a significant portion of where this goes, depending on where the council takes it. And that might take the form of replacements or upgrades, and in some instances, maybe finishing new parks. And then there's also some proposals for maybe new facilities down the road as arts expansion, and also planning for future projects. We We have a lot more information online about this, and we can also answer questions in detail later. Let's move to the next topic, utility rates. And this is probably one of the most impactful on, as far as bottom dollar, but it's also one that may impact our quality of life the most. We have a series of budget discussions and trying to get people to talk to us at these budget booths throughout the city. I'd ask people where you're from. I ask what one of your most favorite things about Provo was, just to get the discussion going. And often the answer was, well, I love the water. It comes out of that tap, it's crystal clear. And I can personally attest, growing up in California, it's really good stuff. It's comes straight out of the mountain here almost, and we're really blessed to have it. Now, I'm not trying to do a sales pitch, so that's just how I feel about it. So, to maintain that system, that quality of life, things do wear out. We also have, again, a master plan that addresses those needs. We have water plans, wastewater plans, and stormwater plans, as well as that have all been adopted by the council. Now the question is, how do we make those plans happen? And again, that's what this discussion goes on. This year, the council did approve a rate increase that equates for the average household about $13 a month. There is a proposal under consideration still for the next 4 years to continue those rate increases to in 5 years at an average about $57 a month extra on utility bills to maintain and expand the system. Some of the policy questions the council could be considering is that the right time schedule? Do we have the right list of projects? Can something be extended? Maybe should something be accelerated? Those are all things that the council needs to weigh and consider as they're asked to consider this proposal. How does Provo compare? We often get this question, and we still, even after these rate increases, and now if I think this is this year's rate increase only, so this chart just represents this year. But we're still on the very low end of the county and some other cities in Utah, but only, well, at least on this list, or in Springville, being lower than us. It's, of course, not a comprehensive list, but these are ones we felt were to Provo, or at least local to us.
I just want to make sure I'm understanding the last part. So you're saying it's after the 5 years, there would be an additional $57 on someone's bill every month.
That's the average for the average household, average consumption of these utilities.
Okay.
And I think that also includes sanitation rates and energy rates. So we have not energy. Thank you for the card. It's a sanitation. Thank you. Okay. Let's move to the next one.
Yes.
And a lot of the projects are replacing infrastructure that is planned to have been retired or needs to be upgraded. It's a very detailed list of projects. This is just 2 examples. One is our reservoirs. They do age. They eventually need replacement. We also have a main transmission line in the city. It's a 48-inch pipe that in the event of a earthquake probably would definitely fail. And so there is a plan to build a redundant line to make sure that doesn't happen in those type of events, or at least minimize the damage in those type of events. Those are just 2 examples, and we can spend some time. We have the master plan. We have a summary of all the projects that are planned to be funded over the next 5 years. We have those available at the back if you're interested in the details. Okay, how does this affect you? The summary, property tax, you will, average homeowner, it's about $210,000 home. We'll pay about 25 cents more a month in property taxes if this is approved. There'll be a final public hearing considering this next Tuesday night, August 4th, 5:30 at the Provo City Center. And there'll be an opportunity for anybody to come and comment on this. And this is part of the state's requirement and actually part of the official truth and taxation hearing. The RAP tax gives 1 cent for every $10 spent for parks Arts and Recreation, and then the utility, again, just for this year is about $13 a month increase. Again, the council has about 8 or 9 months before they will be back in the budget season, considering next year's rate increases. So this is a good opportunity for dialogue, discussion, feedback. With that, again, I'm available for any technical questions, but I'll turn the time back over to Mr. Garrett.
All right, thank you, Matt. We appreciate your overview and introduction to these topics. And so the format that we'll follow, let's just touch briefly on each of these 3 proposed adjustments. And then we'll take questions related to each one. We'll have an opportunity for council dialogue. And then maybe after we've covered each of the 3, we can come back to some general kinds of questions like the one that Pam asked earlier relative to purchasing power of citizens. And then we can even open it up after that to other general non-tax related questions if you have any. So let's start with the property tax. Matt's provided us with an introduction to that and an overview. As he mentioned, the property taxes in our city, the Provo City portion of that, has not seen an increase since 1991. And so we are looking to, and this is the one that we're going to be voting on. We'll have a truth and taxation hearing this Tuesday. And the proposal is that this would generate enough to provide budget for an additional officer. Which council members would like to share any thoughts about this specific tax before we take questions on the proposed increase in property tax? Miller, what thoughts do you have?
Thank you, Mr. Garrett. Only to say that it is the present design of the municipal council that this type of hearing become annual. It has, such a hearing has not occurred in that nearly 25-year term. And the strong position of the council is that that essentially is a form of negligence. And what it encourages is a form of government by simply passing the buck. That is to say, by deferring the projects that require maintenance or replacement until some future day when the situation may appear rosier. Rarely does it. And so in order to be equitable to the residents of Provo over the long term, the council feels strongly that a truth and taxation hearing should be part of its annual calendar. That's not to say that there would necessarily be a substantial tax increase every year. The one this year is modest and minimal. A single police officer being added to the police department. It does keep pace with the inflationary factor, and for that reason, it seems to be council reasonable.
Mr. Miller? Ms. Santiago or Ms. Hales, any comments on this? Anything that you'd like to share?
So to my understanding, that if all things, it's not, can you hear me? Getting a little bit closer. So if all things stay the same, if your home didn't increase in value, if there weren't a school bond, there weren't other things added to the tax, if we did this increase of 2.28%, you probably wouldn't see an increase in your property taxes, and you could even see a decrease, it's from my understanding, if all things stayed the same. Because of that inflation, we're not keeping up with inflation, and our buying power is going down. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you, Ms. Santiago. And Ms. Hales doesn't have a comment at this time, so let's go ahead and open up to questions related to this issue. And because we do have a television audience, we'll invite those who have questions to come forward, and I'll hand them the mic, and then everyone can hear and see. Do you have a question? Okay, please.
Mr. Gary, I just want to remind you of Ms. Jones' earlier question.
Yes. And if you'd state your name and your city of residence. Where do you live?
My name is Jean Lane. I live in the Tree Streets. My husband, my former husband, in the 60s was assistant city attorney of the Annual Christensen, Paulson, and Taylor law firm. And there are a couple of things you've not addressed. Okay, where is your budget for repair and maintenance? Didn't you know that these things would wear out? I mean that. Okay. Also, you're right, everything is going up except my income. What are you going to do about that? Really? I also I volunteer at the senior center. I teach Tai Chi. And I felt that it was not wise for me to ask people to pay for this. Okay, well, anyway, you answer those two questions, and I'll be very happy.
All right, thank you, Jean. Well, if it's okay, I'd like to invite Mr. Parker, our Chief Administrative Officer, to join us here on the dais. I think we're going to have some, I think he's going to be helpful in understanding the budgeting process as well. And so Jean has asked a question similar to the question asked by Ms. Jones earlier relative to purchasing power of citizens and trying to balance that against the increased costs that we face. And certainly that's an important consideration. And I think that each councilman does have to consider how to best balance the increased costs that government faces with the purchasing power of its residents. And certainly will be a factor, I'm sure, in each person's decision. But it's helpful for us to hear and know and be reminded of the impact this has on our citizens. Mr. Parker, could I invite your comment on the, just relative to general budgeting that the city faces, how we account for repairs and maintenance? I know you've been working as Chief Administrative Officer of the city for over 20, and could you help us get a better feel and picture for how we account for the regular and general maintenance of these facilities, as opposed to some of these one-time costs that we're facing?
Thank you. It may seem like 20 years to some good 12, but nonetheless, I may have worn out my welcome already. Let me just talk for a minute about budgeting for operating and maintenance costs. We do that. The vast majority of our budget is involved in operating the city and maintaining our infrastructure, maintaining our service level. About 80% of our general fund is actually personnel, people that it takes to run the city on a day-to-day basis. All told, we have the equivalent, the equivalent of about 860 employees full-time that are required to operate the city, which is, I think, pretty good in my experience based on a city of 120,000 residents. In terms of O&M costs, we absolutely do maintain our water lines, our water tanks. We drain them periodically, re-inspect them. But the fact of the matter is, after 40 years in the case of at least one water tank and 80 to 100 years in some of our water lines, all the maintenance in the world doesn't keep them from corroding. We fight atrophy, we fight the soil conditions that exist in our community, and those things just tend to wear out, despite the fact that we take care of them. I know there's been an ongoing debate in our sister city to the north about how long water lines and sewer lines should last. And some of them have quoted us and saying 80 years is too long for a water line. Well, it isn't, but 85 might be. And so again, these systems do require replacement. They do require investment. And again, we've invested millions of dollars a year in capital outlay in our utility infrastructure. The fact of the matter is that occasionally you have to have a $10 million investment, and that you can't fit that in 1 year. And so again, we have to provide a method for taking care of those large capital investments while still operating and maintaining all that equipment. And so we do that. We do try to make things last a long time. We're strong believers that you fix it until you can't fix it anymore. And I think we've proved that regularly over the years. So those would be my comments there, Mr. Chairman. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. And we won't make you stay up here. As long as we reserve the right to call on you again for some of your expertise and background. Thank you, Mr. Parker. Would any other council members like to comment on Jean's question before we move on to the next one?
This question may be more along the lines of the utility, but it also applies that we did approve a bond to take care of some of the water needs, and there was a plan to take out another bond a few years down the road to help with some of the other needs that we needed, or some of the other infrastructure upgrades. And it was our Simons is here, and he's our specialist for the city for over water and wastewater, and they came back to us and said, we started a couple months late, and so we did get behind the ball a little bit as far as implementing the rates. But what they did do was say that we can take care of these tanks in the next year and a half, the tanks that we need, these holding tanks. But the 48-inch redundant line that we really need to come out of the canyon to bring fresh water into our city, we'll save. We'll save and we'll pay for that and get that in 8 years. And so to this question of how are we budgeting for repairs and maintenance, that's a way of budgeting without bonding. And so there is an effort, and there is a desire that I felt from this council to invest in infrastructure and to make sure that if we build something, we also build in the cost to maintain it. And that we make sure that we have the money to maintain it. And there is a focus effort of this council to do that.
Thank you, Ms. Santiago. Mr. North? Santiago stated nicely the policy of the current municipal council. But with response to the question, which was, why haven't you done this before? Why is it all waited until now? We have to stand up firmly and say, mea culpa, but point the finger at those other guys who came before us, as it were. There's no point in doing that, however. And so the council has simply been staggered by all that was deferred and the enormous capital costs of upgrade and replacement, and tried to set in motion with the recent succession of budgets, not just as Mr. Parker explained, capital funding for replacement, but also ongoing operations and maintenance funding for the upgrade and the repair of what currently exists. So it's a promise, it's promissory, it's written, but at the base of that promise is that we will not defer. We will attend to in the present, so as to avoid as much as possible the recurrence of this kind of present staggering need. With respect to the second question about those whose incomes don't change despite inflationary increases, I'll paraphrase the Supreme Court decision by saying governments are also people. That is to say, inflation seems no respecter of persons. And I want to assure you and anyone else who may have this concern that no budget increment or increment of fees within the city is ever approved by the council without consideration of that substantial element of Provo that is in that situation. To been proposed, which probably distributing increases, that is, increased revenue. However, one of them is fixed. The figure that you saw per month is because it's a mean. And when the rate structure is finally decided on by the administration and approved by the municipal council, you will find that it contains a very substantial, I think, respectable provision for ability to pay.
So you're saying it's going to keep up with inflation? So that the
rate-
residents' income net is gonna be the same as the tax increases?
Actually, with respect to inflation, the cost that you saw with respect to the various water systems is not net of inflation. Those are just projected costs for all of the upgrade and new construction that Mr. Taylor alluded to. The provision for inflation that would become part of the annual, apart from the capital budget. So all I'm saying is that whatever the rate structure turns out to be for the water systems, that dramatic increase that we saw here that sums to $57 per month over a 5-year span of time reflects only the capital costs of the various projects that have been proposed. Inflationary investments are located other bodies.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Let's turn to our next question.
Then let's
Ms. Johnston, would you like to come forward and use the mic, and then our viewing audience can hear as well?
Pam Jones, I live in the northeast part of Provo. I was forced to go on disability about 14 years ago, and I have not been able to work full-time. I'm getting to the age where, although I'm not as seasoned as teen, my health is declining. A lot of people are in my position. I'm pretty much dependent on Social Security income. There were 3 years in which the US government said there was no inflation, therefore we didn't get any cost of living increase. I think this year my allowance has gone up about $10 over last year. Now, how many years is it going to be before I get enough inflationary increase in my income so that I can afford $57 a month, more than what I'm paying now?
I can't answer that question because I don't have the information. But that is an answerable question. It's something that could be forecasted with some degree of accuracy. So there is an answer to the question.
Okay.
If we're willing to provide the information, we could provide the answer. But generally speaking, individuals in the situation you described, and there are many, are asked to pay an added fee per month over the next 5 years, a fee that will increase cumulatively in order to afford the various projects that are proposed over that span of time. However, the amount of the fee will be based on ability to pay. So the $57 that showed up on the slide, or the $11 per month, or the $13 per month, will be in fact adjusted according to your ability to pay, and all likelihood yours will be lower. That is usually in a comparable situation. The inflationary matter is a matter apart from these fee increases. These are real increases, not inflation indexed. They represent the estimates of the cost of these replacement and repair projects over that 5 years.
Right, I understand everybody's costs go up, but so do mine.
So
But you as the government can get an income increase by raising the amount that you take from the citizen. Where do I get that increase in income to meet it? Now, professionally, I'm a technical editor, so it's the nature of the business that I have to criticize other people's work. Yes, I'll get you on your spell. So your paragraph organization too. And I have learned not to criticize without offering suggestions. Okay, what I would like to see is the council and all your people that work with you come up with a list of ways that you can increase the income of the city. One would be taxes, fees, licenses, bonds, whatever. What are the other ones? Okay, somebody asked me you asked me, how can we get more income? And I facetiously said, well, Nevada has gambling and prostitution, slot machines and all that stuff. Okay, you totally can't do that. Okay, how else? What are the other items on your possibilities without considering higher taxes?
there are any number of them, and they have been actively considered as part of this budget. There's another way, though, to address the problem, and that is to reduce the cost. So I know the administration is actively involved with this new rate increase in providing the citizens realistic suggestions for decreasing their water usage, their power usage, and so on, in an effort to reduce costs.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. For our next question, we'll turn to,
Oh, yes.
Ms. Santiago, excuse me.
So Mr. Miller just mentioned the one thing that I wanted to say was water usage, and the rates are based on, or this information is based on water usage. And we have, as a council, commissioned a study. It will cost us $1. Mr. Walters, who is on our Citizens Budget Committee, has agreed to do a study to see how this impact affects the different socioeconomic groups within our city. And we approved this increase for 1 year so that we could do that study and get results back before we look at the next years. This was a 5-year plan originally, and we approved the first year so that we could get this study back and find out who's shouldering the burden. And is this, we want to have a little more information. The needs are still there, the water needs are there, right? But we want to understand how this is affecting the different socioeconomic groups. So we are looking for more information as well, and we have listened to your concerns, and that is one way where we can find out who is shouldering the burden and how much, and is this a fair disbursement of that burden? And then, as was mentioned, the usage, there will be ways to cut down on that. But when you have a fixed income, when you have a large family, maybe you don't have a lot of income, but you also have a large family, where a lot of water gets used. There are lots of different scenarios where this can have a real impact, and we want to understand them with that.
Thank you, Ms. Santiago. Appreciate your reminding us that just the first year of this increase has been approved, that the other years remain proposed at this point. For our next question, we'll turn to Ms. Diane Christensen, who is a member of Provo City's Landmark Commission. Now that I've introduced you.
Yes, I do live in Provo. First, I want to say that what Pam said and what Jean said earlier resounded with me. That it's not any one of the increases that we've heard about or that we're already paying that's burdensome. It's the sum of all the parts. And if it's hard for me and my husband to absorb all of them and wonder if we're ever going to be able to retire comfortably, I can imagine how hard it is for people on fixed income. So that's just a comment. But speaking of the property tax increase to pay for a new police officer, it's hard to disagree that a new police officer would be a good idea. We all want public safety, and that's a great idea. But it just occurs to me, I think of, I work at BYU, I work in the library, and a few years ago when we were really hit hard by the recession, and so was the LDS Church, and so was BYU. The LDS Church really instituted some policies that were a little bit difficult for us to live with, but we did. First, there was a hiring freeze, and believe me, that was tough. For a couple of years, there was no new hiring. Mr. Miller can testify to how some departments really took a bullet on that one. But anyway, even after that, every time we have lost a person in our department, we have had to justify whether that person can be replaced. And in our case, I work in a small department in the library, only 6 full-time people and 2 part-time people. And when we lost one of our most essential people who went to another university, he was not replaced. And so we have all had to just take on extra work, and that's hard. But I just wondered if the city could possibly look at, through attrition, maybe reducing personnel in another department in order to pay for another police officer. That's just an idea.
We know there have been significant efforts in the last, well, really since the recession, in the last 8 years, relative to human resources and workload and number of employees. And I would like to invite Mr. Parker again, if he wouldn't mind, to just help us articulate some of those, what has happened since 2006 to the employee base and how the administration working together with the council are helping to balance that.
Thanks, Mr. Garrett. When we went through the recession in 2007, 2008, we actually eliminated 56 positions in city government, full-time positions. That represented at the time about 5% of our workforce. And some of those were done through attrition, but about half of them were done through layoffs. We're actually eliminated positions and sent our employees off to hopefully find something else to do to generate income. That was a difficult process. I can tell you we have not come anywhere close to restoring those 56. Our employee count is still well below what it was 7 years ago. And actually, we just did an analysis on employees per 1,000 in the city, and we have fewer employees per 1,000 now than we had 20 years ago. And so we have not kept pace with growth in terms of our employee base. And again, I think we work very hard to try to consolidate, trim, share positions. We've converted a lot of positions from part-time or from full-time to part-time in an effort to, again, save on benefit costs. We've also gone through a process of trying to slow the growth in our health insurance and retirement contributions. We were in double digits for a number of years in health insurance. This year, our increase is a mid-single digit, about 5% increase when we were increasing 12 or 14%. We made some substantial changes to the way we deal with our employee benefits program. So again, knowing that 80% of our general fund budget is in personnel, if you want to make a substantial difference in the budget, it's got to involve people. So hope that helps.
Thanks, Mr. Parker. I know the administration has expressed a willingness to continue to be vigilant in that effort. Thanks for the question, Ms. Christensen. We'll next look to Mr. David Connect, who is active in one of our neighborhoods, the Provo neighborhood, Provo South neighborhood, as neighborhood chair. Mr. Connect.
Hey, before I ask the question, I just wanted to point out for Pam and anyone who's 65 and older, and also if you happen to be a widow or disabled or veteran, then you need to look into the county's tax abatement program. And based on those criteria, you can get some, and perhaps even all of your property tax abated or lower to make tax bill every year. I know about that because my 94-year-old mom, who passed away, was on that program. Okay, so I was asked the other day, with things being put on the ballot, whether it be the school bond or the RAP tax, someone said, why can the council raise my property tax without putting it on the ballot? And I didn't have a quick, good answer to that. So I didn't know if you did or if Wayne does or Matt.
There's a couple different ways that property tax is levied, okay? And it depends on the purpose of that tax. And so there's a general fund or a general fund levy portion of the property tax. This is, and all of these rules are set up by state statute. The general fund levy is the levy that funds police, fire, human resources, the council, the mayor's office, and that levy is established by the city council on rules established by the state. Initially, at a certain that rate, actually that rate is adjusted every year. And it's adjusted in a way that the city maintains the same amount of revenue every year. Now that's, there's a lot of caveats to this, so I'm just simplifying here. For instance, if new property comes in the city, that would be additional revenue because there's more valuation of property in the city or additional construction. But the general principle is that revenue would stay the same, and so your rate actually goes down every year, so that you're paying the same amount to the city. Now, the only way that rate can go up is through this process called truth in taxation, and that's again we're talking about the general fund levy, and that's the process that council is under consideration now. It requires you to get a notice in the mail, requires us to do some additional noticing, have a special public hearing, which will be on August 4th. And at that time, they can adjust the rate. And that rate of change could be like we proposed, just very small, 2%. Some cities wanted to propose 100% a couple years ago. Didn't receive much good reception. They eventually blew that down 25%. Now that's one way. Now what confuses the issue though is when the city is taking on debt. Okay, and usually we refer to that as a bond. And when we take on a general obligation bond, that means that it would go to the voters for approval. So you will see things like this building was funded by a general obligation bond, this restoration, same with the rec center. And so because there's two different mechanisms, again, different purposes and how that levy, there is different process for getting them approved. One is by the council, the other is by the voters.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, and thank you, Mr. Connect, for the question. Let's move to, do we have another question on the property tax?
Yes, I do have another question. I have been to some of these meetings.
Please come forward.
Okay, thank you. You're gonna hate me. All right, I have been to some of these meetings before and expressed opinions, and many people have expressed opinions. Are you trying to make us feel good about getting fleeced? I mean that. And there are all kinds of people who don't come to these meetings because they think, well, there's some of them that didn't do any bit of good, not 1 cent. And we're the ones that have to pay for it. We pay for it in many ways. Kids aren't taking music lessons, their families can't afford them. And yet, this area has talent like you wouldn't believe. And you know, and so they're getting down to food, clothing, and shelter, and sometimes not even that.
Thank you for your comment. I can say that there isn't any comment in public input that goes unnoticed, and all council members, it's really how decisions are made and how decisions are arrived at. It's through the collective discussion and contributions of everyone. And so it may seem to any one individual that a comment isn't heard or noticed or has an impact on the decision, but it does. It's the collective contribution of everyone. I think that makes this process move forward. Thank you, Jean, for your comment. Yes, Ms. Santiago.
I just wanted to say emphatically no, I'm not being pleased, because I've had the opportunity to go to a Citizens Police Academy and spend 1 day a week with our officers and find out myself that we may have 7 to 10 officers on shift at any given time. And then to understand some of the responsibilities, if someone gets pulled over and they have one officer there, but they need a drug dog, that's another officer. If they need one more thing, that's another officer. And you could have almost half of your officers on one, pullover. And when you start to think, when you need an officer, you need an officer. And so for me, we're 6 short on officers when it comes to what's been recommended for our city, where we have 6 less officers than what's recommended. And through this budget this year, we were able to get 2, and with this property tax increase, we'll get another, but we're still 3 short from where kind of standard would be for total number of officers for a city our size. So knowing these officers, spending time with these officers, seeing what they do, and gaining an appreciation for what they do with very, slim resources. And really our city does run like that. We run on a, I don't want to say skeleton crew, but it's very efficient, very tight, very efficient with what they do. They use the resources very well. And so I don't want you to feel like this is exorbitant, like this, because it's absolutely not. It's very, very, it's a tight run ship. So.
Thank you, Ms. Santiago.
I'm not sure what you meant by the fleece metaphor. There are various ways to interpret that, but I assume that you meant that the promises to provide this, and what's actually delivered is substandard or non-existent. The council's 2 major responsibilities are for revenues to support the budget of the city and decisions about the use of land. And I can assure you personally, as a 3.5-year veteran of the council, that with every decision regarding money, which is typically requested, that is in response to a request from the administration, it's in the budget, but now the council has to agree to make that money available for the administration. In every case, there is a strict understanding, has been, between the council and the administration, that the administration will provide a report of what it did with the money. so that the council is in position not only to hold the administration responsible, but to assure that what the administration promised was delivered. That's our anti-fleecing policy. Is it fail-safe? No. In the case of the present administration, I think it has worked very well, my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Let's broaden our discussion now to include the RAP tax. Earlier in our discussion, Mr. Tater gave us an overview of the RAP tax, what it's intended to do and focus on. The council voted 2 meetings ago to put this initiative on the ballot in November. And we did commission a study that the results were reported to us in our last work session, that there is support for this kind of source of revenue for the city. 0.1% on sales in the city that would fund support for the arts, parks, and recreation, the RAP tax. So let's begin with maybe some council dialogue, discussion, how people feel about this, and then we can open up to questions about the RAP tax. We'd like to share thoughts on that.
I personally see the RAP tax as a way to take care of what we already have, to take care of the infrastructure that we already have, the parks that we have, the Covey Center, some of those things that we're already paying for, but there's a long list of things that really need to be upgraded or replaced that are not being done because the funds just aren't there. So I personally see the RAP tax as being that component of being able to take care of what we have, with the benefit of some of that money coming from other cities. People from other cities spending money in our city helps us take care of some of those things. They contribute to that tax. And so it's not all borne by the residents of Provo, it's borne by anyone who buys anything in Provo that's taxable. So I see it as a way of taking care of what we have and planning for the maintenance and helping that component of taking care of what we have. And then if we do have money that we can build something new or complete a promised park or finishing a park, if we can do that and show that we can maintain it as well, that's what I see the benefit of the RAP tax. I don't see it as going out and building lots of new things to make everyone in each corner of the city happy. That's not kind of what I foresee this being. I foresee this being a way to take care of and maintain what we have. And then in the future, once we've got a handle on that, then start to pay for improvements and increasing our arts and increasing some of the things that really add to the quality of life that we have here.
Thank you, Santiago. I think it's been estimated by the city that this RAP tax, if passed, will generate an additional $1.2 million from just 1 cent for every $10 spent in our economy. $1.2 million that can be used to improve the parks, maintain the parks, address some arts programs in the city. And so if the voters approve that, then what would come back to the council is decisions about whether or not to bond up front for those funds that will come in. It's a 10-year tax period, and then how those monies would be allocated. Mr. Miller?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In recent years, the city adopted what it called the Utility Transportation Fund, or UTF, which is a novel idea in the state of Utah. Provo, the only city to have adopted such a fund. And it amounts to a fee, a utility fee, that goes into a perpetual fund for the repair and upgrade of our roads and streets within the city. One of the major complaints of municipalities is their inability to remain current with the upgrade of the transportation infrastructure. And this fund has taken a very large step toward assuring that is not the case in Provo. At the time the municipal council debated whether to create this fund, there were three criteria that it cited. One was equity, that is, all utility customers would pay into the fund. The second was transparency. It would be clear to anyone who wished to know what was in the fund at any one time, and annually the municipal council would revisit the assessment structure of that particular fund and revise it if so inclined. And the third criterion was sustainability. And we became convinced unanimously that the utility transportation fund met those three criteria directly. I see the same three criteria applying to the RAP, so-called RAP tax. It is equitable. All who shop in Provo pay the same percentage. Moreover, it's equitable in the sense that we're now going to be on a par with other communities that have already adopted the tax. It is transparent, as Mr. Garrett and others have mentioned. It amounts to $1 per $10 of purchases. A penny, beg your pardon, a penny per $10 of purchases. And it is also transparent. That is transparent. It is also sustainable. This is something that will be continued, as Mr. Garrett mentioned, over a 10-year period of time, with that revenue flowing to the city for the purposes that have been mentioned.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. We'd like to open up to questions relative to the RAP tax. And I'd like to remind those viewers that there is a Google Hangout. How do we refer people to that for any questions they would like to submit?
Karen? If you go to the Google Hangout, there's a question and answer feature that they can submit.
Okay, so if you go to the Google Hangout feature, there's a Q&A section, and then they'll feed those questions to us here.
And that,
those of you who would like to submit
that can be accessed through the blog, provocitycouncil.blogspot.com.
provocitycouncil.blogspot.com. Thank you. For our first question, we'll turn to Mr. George Stewart, who's a member of the City Council's Budget Committee. Mr. Stewart.
As a Budget Committee, we were asked to help in the sustainability of our general fund. That, as was shown earlier, there was a gap between revenue and expenses. And so the RAP tax is a method of helping do that. I've been told that the citizens won't vote for a RAP tax unless they get something new. I think if they understood what the general fund was subsidizing current RAP facilities or activities, they would be more than willing, so we wouldn't have to increase property tax. Let me just give you some figures. This is from this year's budget, which was approved by the council. The council approved a budget that was submitted by the administration to spend $335,428 to subsidize the Covey Center. 42.5% of the Covey Center's expenses come from the general fund as a subsidy, as a transfer. The ice sheet, $174,902, 14.9% of the ice sheet's expenses are subsidized from the general fund. That makes the general fund less sustainable, and the need then to increase property taxes to make the general fund sustainable. Golf course, $144,540 is going to subsidize the golf course. 17.1% of the golf course's expenses are subsidized from the general fund of the city. I would propose to the council, and if I was a member of council and I'm a candidate for council, that at least these subsidies be paid from the RAP tax rather than spending the money on new facilities that we don't have the money to operate and sustain anyway. Why would we increase our expenses by bonding for a RAP tax, bonding against the RAP tax, paying bonding fees, paying interest to build facilities, but we are having a difficult time maintaining the current facilities we have? So I would hope that the council, in their deliberations this year, since I'm not on the council, but the budget committee, I think, as a member of the budget committee, I would recommend that we use and propose at least that portion of the back tax would be used to eliminate the subsidies from the general fund for these RAP activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. A helpful comment. Other comments or questions? If not, we'll move to the third and final area of focus for our public hearing. Town hall meeting. Town hall meeting. And that is the utility rate increases. We've referred to this in several of our comments here tonight. We reference aging infrastructure and other needs that the city faces at this time. And as we discuss this program and process, I'd like to call on Mr. Art Simons from our Public Works Department to just give us an overview as we get into this discussion about some of the needs that this part of the city, this department currently faces with respect to infrastructure. Mr. Simons.
Thank you. The needs are many. Is that better? Some of the issues that we look at now, if I can spill just a few facts. Right now, the city is using between 52 and 53 million gallons a day of water. Our total storage space in our tanks, if they're all full, is 32 million gallons. So what the odds is that they are in a position to fill the tanks with the sources we have. Our sources are strong, very strong. And that over the years, we've been able to keep up with and are, what I believe we could say, in very good shape with our water sources. When it comes to the tanks, we fill those up and it gets to a point that we have nowhere else to put the water. And so we shut some of our wells off until the time comes that the city utilizes water again. With that demand on the system, when it comes, typically now between midnight and 6 a.m., it draws so fast on the tanks that they will empty faster than we can get the water back into it. And so that's part of what it's so critical to have we need more storage space. Not to mention if something goes wrong with one of our sources, if we lose some of our wells due to, say, for instance, these shafts spin at 1,800 revolutions per minute. And they'll run for hours a day or all day long, which well it is. The shaft snaps, so that takes 3,500 gallons a minute away from our production capability. We're still the water coming in at that. Now it's 325 feet down to where that point is. So with those are ongoing expenses. Your comment about operation expenses, that's part of what that is. But now, so we're going to have the reservoirs. We also have a 48-inch aqueduct that brings the majority of the water for Provo to reach our main system. Loses that aqueduct in 1944 or 1945. If we lose that aqueduct a minute, pouring through it. So we have been somewhat on borrowed time ever since that day to have a redundant source to be able to bring that with the demand. If we lose anything at all, you're able to keep from having that happen. But the reality is that the demand on the system increases our capability to get that water. Reclamation and the members of this council and seeing those facilities. They're old and they're on the border, some of them, of failure. So we're trying to bring those up to make sure that they don't fail. Some of that environment, that I have to compliment the administration and the members of this council, they stepped in to look at and went in to see, just, they didn't take our word for it, they went in to see the position that we were in. And that's the most toxic, horrible environment I can possibly imagine to tell you about. But they went in to see what it was. We're in a position that I can't stress strongly enough if we don't stay up with, and I appreciated your comment, why aren't we replacing those items? That is what we're trying to do. And we're trying to stay up to speed on being able to supply water, take care of it afterwards through our water reclamation plan. We have hundreds of miles of wastewater collection lines that take it to the plant. We have hundreds of miles of water distribution mains, as well as our spring sources and our wells that we're trying to work on constantly to keep them up. Every year, we go into those areas and spend the operation time to make it work. But we also, you can only do so much. And with the demand that's on the system, which the Provo City citizens, we feel have a right to, and we want to provide that service, but we have to be able to have more capability to do it. We are somewhat on the edge, if you will, of being able to supply if we're not able to get some of the improvements that we're trying to get accomplished now. The citizen earlier asked me about if I was to prioritize looking at our projects. They all need to be done. But the 48-inch aqueduct, I sit and look at it from an operations standpoint. If we lose that aqueduct, we go out of the major support portion of our supply. And it's not easy to fix. It's a reinforced concrete pipe. That was great technology for that back in 1945. It's not the best technology now. And the technology on the pipelines that we have now, if something breaks, we're in within a few hours typically to make that repair. We won't be able to typically do that if we lose that aqueduct. So there's a number of projects that there's not a one of them that isn't very, very necessary. I hope that's.
Thank you, Mr. Simons. And if I may compliment Mr. Simons and all those who work with him, and especially including his predecessor, Merrill Bingham, who for many years have put remarkable systems in place and have provided us with the quality, helped us with the quality of water and the sources that we enjoy. My kids, as they marry, they often ask, should I move to Lehigh? Should I move to Saratoga Springs? I encourage them to stay in Provo, because we have great water and great sources that we enjoy. As we mentioned earlier, the council has voted on the first year of this monthly increase, and with 4 years remaining on the proposed 5-year plan to fund these. And we intend through studies and citizen input to take a look at this each year. What input or comments do council members have at this time relative to the utility rate increases before we take questions?
I would just encourage those who maybe feel that it's not necessary to take a tour. And I don't know if I'm going to make you very busy, but that was a very telling thing for me as a new council member to go on the tour and to walk into the toxic places you mentioned, to see what our facilities are like and the needs that are there. I'm a very visual person, and when I see it, I understand it really well. And if you have questions, I think you should take a tour, just kind of see what the needs are, because it was very evident to me, and I feel strongly this money well spent. Although I understand, and we all kind of took a deep breath when we realized what we were going to have to do to accomplish this. But the need is there, and I've said before, and I'll say it again, that we can do without a lot of things, but we can't do without water, and it's an important source that our residents expect us to maintain and to provide. And so I don't think this is something that we can push down the road. And that redundant line, it will take 8 years to save up to replace that. So we're still looking at many years to do that without bonding, if we do that without bonding. So it is it's an important thing. I don't think that we can, that I can stress that enough. And it was very evident to me as I took that tour.
there any questions relative to the utility rate increases and what we've talked about tonight on the some of the needs that we have here? If so, please come forward, or we can have someone bring a microphone. Does this microphone reach? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Tell us your name.
I'm Stan Harvey, I'm going to talk loud enough so you can hear me, I hope.
Yes.
Because as we get older, our hearing goes too. So thank you for talking, Matt and these others, but I appreciate it if you'd talked a little bit louder so we know what's going on. One thing I have on my mind is, does the UTA or the bus systems generate, how much money do they generate for Provo every year? Think about that. Per passenger, or however you want to figure it. How much money do they generate for the city of Provo every year?
Transportation is subsidized. It doesn't generate money. It's at different levels. For buses, we subsidize just a little over $5 per passenger. So it's all subsidized. And for tracks, I think it's $3 per passenger, and for front runner was $11 per passenger. So public transportation is subsidized.
Any other questions relative to the utility rate increases or any questions that you might have come here with tonight? Yes, please come forward.
Yep. Just have one question. My name is Stephen Hemingway, in District 5. And the question I had is, of the council members, what was the breakdown of the vote to accept the changes? Who voted for? Or was it unanimous, all voted for the increase?
Utility, you're talking utility increases, you
Yeah.
voted against it?
Yeah.
I know Mr. Sewell wanted a different, oh, sorry. This is completely off of memory, but Mr. Sewell voted against it, I believe, because he wanted a different, he wanted it spread out over time a little differently.
He's not here tonight.
And he's not here tonight. And I'm trying to remember, everyone else voted for it.
So
You're 6-1.
Thank you, Steve. Other questions? Pam?
Speaking of subsidizing, I understand that impact fees for new developments do not cover the expenses they are supposed to, like roads and power lines and so on. Why are all the residents subsidizing what makes developers rich?
Mr. Taylor?
I won't attempt to address the policy implications, but impact fees are meant to cover a portion or all of the cost of the potential or studied impacts of new development on the city. So as you have new development, they will have increased demand for services, whether it be water, sewer, energy, parks and rec, some other fees. The city council, probably over a decade ago now, originally implemented the impact fees. And it was decided at that time not to charge the full amount. I can't speak for that council. I wasn't part of the council staff at that time, and certainly can speak for 7 different voices. There is some rhetoric, and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, but that one purpose in not charging the full fee is, one, this is still an issue of competition. There has been some assertion that one way to offset utility rate increases and other tax increases and fees is to bring economic development. And to remain competitive, maybe one policy reason
why you wouldn't charge a full fee is to continue to allow, or at least retain a level of competition with other cities and attracting that type of development that will provide other sources of revenue. So as you consider the cost of development, there's also the opportunity cost that may be lost if that development goes someplace else. That may be one of those reasons why the council did that. But I'll turn it back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. A couple of questions that were submitted beforehand, and we'll finish up with these unless there are other questions here. One relative, this is from the Wasatch neighborhood, to curbside recycling and how it is benefiting the residents, and what purposes we have as a city for undertaking recycling. I would comment that this program is not entirely about environmental stewardship, but also about fiscal stewardship. We look for ways that we can use our city's resources, and this helps us divert some of the garbage away from the landfill, and it helps us impact the bottom line that way. Any other comments relative to curbside recycling?
So how does it benefit the residents? We've had a pretty, we've had quite a few comments from residents saying that they want it more frequently. And that was the response to that. We decided to do it weekly instead of bi-weekly. I mean, every 2 weeks, sorry. Instead of every 2 weeks, they wanted it weekly because they felt like they could fill their blue cans much more than their regular trash cans, and wanted smaller trash cans, regular trash cans. So it was in response to citizens' requests.
So in fact, that weekly recycling service has already begun, or will begin in November. Thank you. And then the final question is relative to the west side connector, which is under construction from the south side of Provo, connecting close to I-15 to the airport. And an update on that. The construction, as you know, is underway. When the road base is settled to the desired compression, asphalt work will begin. And I don't know that we have an estimated time of completion on that, Mr. Parker.
Early to mid next year.
So mid 2016. And then we'll begin the asphalt work when that compression is complete. Any other questions here? Those were the 3 questions that we submitted. Yeah. Okay. Well, we appreciate your attendance and participation with us here tonight. I think it's been certainly helpful to us to listen to and hear from you. And as Mr. Miller pointed out earlier, we intend to make this an annual process where we can hear relative to budgets, and to have this kind of hearing on an annual basis. It's helpful. So thank you again for your participation. Mr. Taylor?
I could just make one quick plug for continued dialogue. On the back table is contact information for council members, for council information outlets, Facebook, social media, email. I think one of the things about this is ongoing. This is really not just a once-a-year discussion. And so I think it would be good if you reach out to council members anytime during the year. Also let your friends know they can watch this entire presentation online on demand through our blog, and give you another opportunity to share this if you didn't have an opportunity to bring somebody with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. We'll stand adjourned. Thank you again.